Jen, I just wanted to say we're continuing with our, of course, iServe sermon series. We started with serving God. Last Sunday, of course, we talked about serving God's people. And the whole point of this is that emphasizing our commitment to serving through the month of March. And as Pastor Kit would call it, March Madness, from the whole, situations happening during March, basketball season and stuff like that. And I just wanted to greet also Vaughn watching. It says watching from Virginia. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, Vaughn.
And also Kevin says you're going to have a new friend from us soon.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
I think that might
Almost
work.
there.
I'm just gonna work on that one. I think,
What?
because
Yes,
the
almost
others
there.
kind of like I lost the battle. So, but I think, but no. But I think, what's the name of the eldest? She likes me, right?
I don't know.
Okay, so
Your love
Well, you
relationship.
say you have
with us.
progress, you don't even know the
I know. It's my bad.
There are a lot, so
Yeah.
it's hard to remember.
Ayla saying joining from Sydney. Hello, Ayla. Thank you for joining as well. Okay, so
Yes.
and again, like what I've said, last Sunday we explored, we studied, we discussed a familiar story from Mark chapter 10. Most of us, if you've been a believer for quite some time, I think this is a familiar narrative. This is a familiar story in Mark chapter 10, verse 35 to 45. I have to say, Jen, while it may be well known, but God's word is always, when we study it, is always what? It always speaks to us in a fresh and powerful way. Each time we read it, each time we study the word.
Yeah.
And I believe that Sunday was the same. We made it to Pasadena as well. Pastor Kit was preaching, encouraging word for all of us to remind us, and again, it's not a hard sell for us during the month of March, rather, for us to be able to, remind people to serve. And I think because 67% of our congregation actually serve. And actually that's a very high. And I think more on this series when we were preparing this, that we will never forget the heart, the reason why we serve. And it is always connected to the word of the Lord for us, Jen, talking about not losing our first love. Because again, if we just go through the motion and serving tends to have that proclivity on you love that word tendencies of creating that, going through the motion, going through the routine, but yet forgetting the reason why we do it. And I think the whole purpose of this whole March is to go back to that, and for us not to lose sight, and also not for us to get out of track on why we really serve. And we started with, of course, with week 1, Romans chapter 12 verses 1 and 2, offering our bodies as a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable, and pleasing to the Lord according to the word. And that is our reasonable, logical worship, true worship according to NIV. So today, last Sunday, we shifted a bit. And the question is serving God's people. Again, we're going back to the heart, because the heart is always, we always wanted to serve people, but yet what is the heart? And also specifically, breaking down wrong mindsets. As we talked about a worldly mindset and versus a kingdom mindset when it comes to serving. And today we're going to continue with that. And again, open your Bible to Mark chapter 10, and we're starting with verse 35. And I'm going to repeat this because important for us to go through this again. And this is going to be quite long. This is a little jam-packed, Jen. When I was preparing this, it's a little bit like almost like a 3 preaching in all, but hang in there, all right? But it's going to be good. It's going to be good. I promise you that, because this is God's word, not because of me, because of God, speaking to us, all right? Starting on verse 35, let's read the story. And Jesus and James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came up to him and said to him, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." And he said to them, "What do you want me to do for you?" Continuing, and they said to him, "Grant us to sit one at your right hand and one at your left in your glory." I'm just going to read it here. It's just too far. Jesus said to them, you could click. And Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup I drink, or to be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized?" And they said to him, "We are able." And Jesus said to him, "The cup that I drink, you will drink, and with baptism and with I am baptized. And with the baptism with which I am baptized, you will be baptized. But to sit at my right hand or at my left is not mine to grant, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared. And when the 10 heard it, they began to be indignant at James and John. And Jesus called them to him and said to them, you know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be a slave of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Again, what a story. A familiar one. Many facets in which we could dive into this and understand the perspective in leadership, serving, and again, just focusing on the cup and the baptism, talking about the challenges and that comes with that. But yet the story in Mark chapter 10, the one that we have read, verse 35 to 45, is just part of a bigger narrative. And I think seeing that in a bigger narrative prepares us or to understand what was going on a lot clearer, if you ask me. So this is Jesus's moment with his disciples. Again, the whole moment was the quest, and the discussion and the argument among the disciples to answer who is the greatest, or wondering among them who is the greatest among them, which actually was not the first time that they have discussed about this. This is not the first time that they have went through this. And why? Because again, in Mark chapter 9, if you want to open your Bible, there it says here, and they came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, what were you discussing on the way? Verse 34, but they kept silent, for on the way they had argued with one another about who was the greatest. So they were discussing who's the GOAT, greatest of all time. And again, as I mentioned last Sunday, maybe because of the things that they have experienced, they have seen Jesus and how things are going on. And now also that you look at the New International Reader's Version, the greatest there is translated to the most important person. So pretty much there's a pacing contest among the disciples. Who's the greatest? Who's the most important person? So again, this moment and this tension that you see happening gives us at least an idea of a couple of things. Number one is the state of mind and of the disciples. The state of mind and where they are at. Their mindset, their perspective, their thinking of how the culture has affected them, of course. Again, a world mindset, to be more precise, also the norm in the culture. Again, this kind of discussion, when they were having this discussion, is the normal thing that is happening in the culture. And I think we don't have to go back 2,000 years ago for us to understand that. It is still happening in our culture today.
Right.
Because the world mindset is all about who is the greatest, the one that is the greatest, the most important person, gets more attention, has more privilege, and not only that, it's recognized more than the other. That's why the pursuit of our culture is to be the best and to be the most important person among everyone. In short, for us to be above everyone else. Any comment for that so far, Jen?
No, I think it's so normal for us to want to up one another. It's
Yeah.
like, it's so normal. Like, I remember the jokes in the Filipino context. You have nothing on my grandfather or my
In Tagalog,
grandmother.
we say that in Tagalog, wala ka sa tatay ko.
Oh yeah, or my mother, my father. So you always want to up one another,
Yep.
and I think that that's the funny side of it. But the reality, sometimes when you go through life in general, it happens in the home,
Yep.
in family, in siblings. It happens among husband and wife.
There's a competition. There's like who's
Competition.
better, who's bringing more money. And not only that, in the siblings, you mentioned that. Again, the culture, again, it shows in everything that we do. The joke is actually just the reflection of what's happening in the culture.
That's right.
That's why among the siblings, right? I mean, sometimes the parent can't help but compare who's the better child than the other. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so it happens in the home, and then so you go to
The society.
workplace,
Yeah,
the
workplace.
society,
Same.
or even at school. There's always this the competition of being the best. And there's nothing wrong with healthy competitions,
Yeah.
but it's
And
like
we're not against competition.
not against that. But sometimes it could be unhealthy when we have motivations that aren't right.
Yeah.
And so I think just
And I think more than that, Jen, I think for me, sorry.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
sorry.
it's more than just that for me. I think it's also because it's not the competition per se, but when we put our identity and who we are based on what we have achieved.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, and so I think tonight is gonna be a great, again, a heart check.
Yes, I would say.
Yes, it's a great heart check on these things. Why do you want to get ahead? What are you doing? What are your actions based from? Where is
Yeah.
it coming from? And I think this is gonna be one of those discussions because James and John wanted to be ahead,
Yeah.
and I think it's innate for each
And I
one
think
of
it's
us to
just like what I've said, it's not just James and John. There was a discussion among them. I think, as we could see later, that this is not just them, it's actually the whole disciples. Again,
Yes.
this is the norm, just as I have mentioned. So, and because of that, look at this, they were silent. They kept silent. Their silence here speaks a lot to what's going on. They don't want to bring it out in the open
Yes.
because Jesus was asking them. I mean, you see what's going on, and he was in the house, and he asked them. No one talked.
Yeah.
They kept silent, for on the way they had argued with one another about who was the greatest. So no one talked. But again, at this point, Jesus knew what was going on, but no one wants to blurt it out. Maybe because, again, no one wants to snitch, and no one wants to really share what's going on inside their heart or what they're thinking.
Yeah.
So again, what Jesus did is not interesting. Jesus immediately challenges and corrects this mindset because he knew what was going on. Look at the reaction here in verse 35. Again, we're just on chapter 9. And he sat down and called the 12, and he said to them, if anyone would be first, he must be last of all and servant of all. Again, that's the first discussion about this.
Yes.
So Jesus right away, immediately challenges, corrects the mindset. But somehow, however, this view of leadership is deeply ingrained in their hearts and in their mind. That's why it resurfaced again after this discussion in Mark chapter 10. And that's exactly what we have read, starting on verse 35. And if you look at that, it says, and James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came up to him and said to him, Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you.
That's right.
Interesting, isn't it? They were silent at the first encounter or the first argument or the first discussion, but now they're no longer silent.
Yeah.
So I want us to understand this because, again, at the end of the day, what's ever in your heart, you might have to, sometimes you keep it within you, but it's going to come out sooner or later.
Yes.
And this is the moment now because they don't want to come clean. They got rebuked, of course, by Jesus in a sense because God, again, Jesus discerned what was going on, taught them a lesson, but yet it didn't sink in.
Yeah.
So that's why it happens again. So what they were thinking, what they were silent about, now they're blurting out. So the heart, the mouth now is kind of like declaring what's in their heart. And he said to them, what do you want me to do for you? Look at verse 37. And they said to him, grant us to sit one at your right hand and one at your left in your glory. They definitely, first and foremost, the audacity of it was almost stunning for me. The audacity for this ask. This is not a small favor, Jen. This is a big thing. And they knew exactly what they were asking.
Right.
So I want you to understand the whole mindset, emotion that was going on here. It started from them being silent about this as if they are innocent, as if they were kind of like, I'm not that type of person. But yet at the very, at chapter 10, you would see that everything is on the table now. The audacity. They were convinced that they were asking for something good and maybe just the norm. Because why would I say that it is maybe the norm in the culture? Because it was a discussion before and now it's being discussed again. After all, you have to understand, they were not strangers to Jesus. They were part of his inner circle, the one who went to the mountain, Mount of Transfiguration. Among the first to follow Jesus, that's James and John, the first among the 12. Okay? And also, surely if anyone deserved positions of honor in his coming kingdom, it was them.
Wow.
Yep. So all of this, because again, they kind of like, there's a pattern in this whole thing. There's a process in thinking that arrives on this kind of question, because this is a big ask. They have thought about this. They were discussing it in chapter 9. Maybe they were processing this, and then boom, they asked the question. Just like what I mentioned last Sunday, James and John were asking for three things. And let me put that on the screen for you. Position, prominence, and power. I've unpacked that last Sunday. We're not going to go dive deep into that. That's not the preaching. This is just a summary of what we talked about last Sunday. So position, of course, it's about being ahead, above than everyone else. So of course, position, hierarchy is that what they were asking, to be seated, beside Jesus in glory. They know what that is. Okay, that's a position of, again, it's a position that everybody sees you. Okay, prominence is special status, recognition. So that your special status above others, what they were asking Jesus. And of course, power. They were asking for authority over others in God's kingdom.
Yeah.
Wow. So that they were asking for this three. And guess what? When you look at the norm in the culture, that is still what people are after. We are after for position. We are after for prominence. We are after for power. Again, all of these are self-centered. Position is because, again, we're going to talk about that. Jesus' response was, for me, is quite fascinating, because it was gentle but yet firm. And let's read that in verse 38. Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you are asking." I like that. You do not know. So that means whatever you're blurting out in your mouth and whatever you're asking, you really don't know what you're asking. So you think this is how things operates, but you don't know. You're this is way above your paycheck, what you're asking. But yet Jesus didn't rebuke them. And yet gently says, "Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or to be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized?" And Jesus' cup and baptism refers to his suffering and death and atonement. And again, because he prayed, the cup represents his suffering and sacrificial death on the cross. Because again, in Mark chapter 14, Jesus was praying in verse 36, Jesus prays, "Remove this cup from me." So that was what he's talking about. Baptism here doesn't refer to the water baptism or the baptism of the Holy Spirit, but of suffering and overwhelming trial. Because he mentioned that again in Luke, talking about this baptism that he has to complete. So it's interesting, isn't it? So that's why Jesus says, you don't know. And yet and then they said, interesting, because in saying that, I didn't put it on the screen. Let me open it a bit here. And I hope you're still tracking with me. Just give me a thumbs up, or just a thumbs up if you're still there. I just wanted to know that you're still tracking and you're not lost to this discussion. And I hope you're opening your Bible as well. And then, of course, the answer of the disciples here is that they are able. Of course, interesting. So, and again, when you read this, Mark chapter 10, he says that, and they said to him, "We are able." So, and Jesus said to them, "The cup that I drink, you will drink, and with the baptism with which I am baptized, you will be baptized." That means Jesus says in advance to them that you're going to be going through suffering as well. You're going to be tried. You're going to go through suffering. You're going to go through, challenges, trials, and they are right, of course. But yet Jesus, for the person to sit at my right or my left, that's for my Father's. So here's what he said. It's not my left to grant, but it was for those to whom it was prepared. So with that, and think about this. So we're going through this whole discussion. I like Mami Lita's mahalo.
I think she's supposed to put the thumbs up, but
just like that. So that's kind of like Hawaiian right there. So, and then the 10 disciples heard their request, and now they were indignant. What do you mean by indignant? Let's read that in verse 41. And when the 10 heard it, they began to be indignant at James and John. Interesting word. They became very mad or very angry. This is not just angry, became very angry at them. Right? And that look at the word there. At whom? James and John. There's that particular placement of this anger. And that is James and John. And maybe you're asking this question while I was reading this. Why are they mad? Jen, why are they angry? Because again, they were indignant. The two that asked, that was bold, that was shot down by Jesus. They heard what was being discussed, and they were angry. Interesting. I have some few things that I'm going to put in on the screen, and maybe they were angry because, and again, after I say the emotions here, I'm going to put that this is how this emotion thinks. Okay, the thinking, because again, they were mad. They didn't say anything. The description is that it began to be indignant at them. They didn't say anything. Again, just like the first one, they were silent, but yet there is that emotion that comes from this. And we're going to identify, why are they mad? Here are three emotions, maybe why they are mad. Number one, because of jealousy. Because jealousy thinks this, why them and not me? Could it be possible, Jen, that they were jealous?
Yes.
I think so. Why them and not me? This is a classic, comparison trap. Jealousy is about comparison. You have to understand this. They were jealous is because they were comparing. Why them, not me? Okay? So jealousy makes us feel that if someone else gets ahead, we lose something. So the emotion, and as Gabby says that, beat them to it first. Yes, but I agree with that 100%. But maybe why? Because the first one, maybe, again, in no particular order for me, this is just some emotions that maybe I put myself, if I'm in that position, what emotion would come out? It's because, again, jealousy. Why them, not me? Jealousy often overestimates our own worth while resenting the success of others. Let's pause. Let's think about that. So if that's the thinking in the world, that's why when you get promoted in the workplace, some people are mad, some people are not happy, is because of jealousy.
Yeah.
Because they may not be saying this, but their reaction or what they're thinking is this, why them, not me? The problem, Jen, is this. These are the disciples. And we bring that, these are believers. So that means we're not immune. And imagine this, could this happen in church? Oh, of course. So when you hear yourself thinking this, why them, why Sean, not me, why Jen, not me, why that person got the hoodie, not me, why, it might be coming from a place of jealousy. I'm not saying it's 100% like that, but might be. That's what I'm saying. So when it comes to serving, and you see people maybe standing in front, singing, past the audition, you have to watch out. When you start to begin to analyze this and ask yourself, why this person, not me, maybe you're becoming indignant. It's maybe because it's just revealing the condition of our heart. That we don't really understand what leadership and greatness is about in God's kingdom. What do you think about that? I mean, that's why I wanted to jump into this, because I wanted to more understand the emotion, because I don't have the time. I went overtime last Sunday. If I put this, most probably we would stay there forever. So, but they were indignant. They were very mad. It's straight. There is a particular placement of this anger, and it's at James and John. So I look at that emotion. I'm like, why would they get mad? Because maybe it's jealousy. They're comparing themselves. They feel like if someone else gets ahead, we lose something. So like what Gabby says, they beat me to it, because if they go first, then I lose in the process. I mean, I lost something because they got what I wanted, so I'm losing something. Think about that. Any comments so far on jealousy?
It's very clear.
Very clear. Here's the next one, and this is a maybe again. And we're going to put the thinking, because again, they didn't blurt it out. As always, on the first day, were silent. They were silent again, just mad. As written by Mark, the emotions was what? Anger. But it's coming from an emotion, of course. Maybe here's another one. Maybe it's about betrayal. And what is that? Here's how betrayal thinks. I can gain by deceiving. Maybe they were thinking they were betrayed by James and John. That's why they were mad. What do I mean by that? Let me just read this. Betrayal is in a broader biblical sense, involves breaking trust or acting against someone's best interest for personal gain. They were thinking they were like betrayed by these two. Like they beat me into it. I was betrayed, often at the expense of others. So that they felt maybe they were betrayed in a sense. Betrayal often involves what? Secrecy. Because again, why would I say betrayal? Because they went ahead to Jesus, the two of them, while all of them was walking. Maybe some of the people felt they were slighted about the whole thing because they went ahead, walking with Jesus and asking Jesus without bringing them in, bringing the 10. Because the first one in chapter 9, they were having the discussion among themselves. So maybe they felt betrayed about the whole process. Also, there is some hidden agenda here. Because again, why would they think there is a hidden agenda? Because they were not included in the discussion. This could be, or an attempt to secure personal advantage. That's why they went ahead. In a way that disregards the well-being of others. So, betrayal. I can gain by deceiving. It's interesting because, again, you being in church for quite some time and working also in the corporate world for almost 3 or more years, I think, I forgot. This is quite interesting and this is very common. That we accept this. We don't call it betrayal, of course. We call it just, upping one another in a sense, or just doing my own thing to secure my future. But if it is done in secrecy that, disregards the well-being of others, it might be betrayal. It might be. Think about that. So they were mad. Maybe they felt betrayed because in 9:35 they were discussing among them, this, and then they went ahead and talked to Jesus. And here's the last one. Maybe the emotion is pride. Here's how pride thinks. I'm better than others. I'm better than who's preaching. I'm more better preacher than that person. I speak well than that person. I have a better smile than person. I am what? I sing better than that person. Why am I not being asked to sing? Pride causes them to focus on their own perceived greatness. That's the problem with pride. I like this description about pride is that the overestimation of ourselves. The overestimation of ourselves, believing that we deserve the position of honor and power over the other disciples. That's what they were thinking. I am better than those two. Pride is rooted in a distorted view of self, where one thinks more highly of themselves than they ought to. In this case, they believe they deserve to be the closest to Jesus when his kingdom comes. Look at those. And I look at those 3 gems, but I can't help but think, when it comes to serving in the church, if we are not careful, when that indignation rises up, we need to ask this question and also process this on our head, because there's a thinking that is involved, because jealousy thinks, why them, not me? Betrayal thinks, I can gain by deceiving, or actually betrayal is another one here, is entitlement. And also pride thinking, I'm better than other people. So when you hear that said in a different way, but in the same spirit, that's what this is all about. And again, I want to highlight that because this is where everything started, because of that emotion that Jesus discerned, because they were indignant. They were not just mad, they were incensed about this whole idea of James and John speaking to Jesus before them. Interesting, isn't it? What do you think, Jen?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking when you kept on saying that, it could happen to church, while you're serving in church. And I'm just thinking, I remember we did all our FAITH awardees and stuff, and I think that's a great thing, but it's a good thing also to kind of assess in our hearts, like as the awards are being given, like, okay,
what are you thinking?
What are you thinking? Are you thinking like, wait, I'm better than that person? Like, hey, I am more faithful, I'm more available, I'm more involved, I'm more teachable than that, or I'm more hungry than that person.
Why them, not me?
Why them, not me? Yeah. And then you cannot really rejoice
and celebrate.
You can't celebrate like and congratulate or even be happy for the person who received the award, because you're thinking, I should have been the one who gotten the award.
Yes.
You know?
And sometimes here's what happens. You congratulate, but deep inside you are not really happy about that person. That becomes like a betrayal now.
Yeah.
Because again, I'm gonna do this someday and I'm gonna be better. I could serve more, and we have to be careful.
Yeah. And
We
also,
have to be careful.
I remember there were, sometimes you think, and I think James and John tried to capitalize on their relationship with Jesus.
Of course. And
so that
they're
they could
part of
get
the inner
ahead.
circle. Yeah.
Exactly.
Get ahead.
And so sometimes we could also think the same way, like, hey, that person is being awarded or being put in a leadership position
Because they were close to Pastor Kit, closer to
to-
Pastor Robert, closer to your ministry coordinator. See how this place?
Yeah, and it does not promote
Yeah.
a good relationship amongst the disciples and among us. I mean, if it happened to the disciples, it's not far that it would happen to us. And so far be it that, as we continue giving the awards, as we continue serving together, that we would have those, mind thoughts, that we would entertain those thoughts in our mind, because, it's something that Jesus actually addressed with
And
his
that's when, Jen, I
disciples.
could put another one, is that entitlement.
Yes,
And
that's
what's
right.
entitlement? The thinking of entitlement is this: I deserve better than this. That's actually what it is.
Yes.
Put that in. You could put any more emotions in there. This is just my top 4. I'm putting entitlement. Entitlement always says that I could have better than this.
I should
be
be
given
more.
more.
Or yeah.
That's
Exactly.
the entitlement.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why they felt mad, is because again, we should have been the one who came up there, and that's what Gabby says. And James and John beat them to it first. I should be there. I don't deserve this.
Yeah.
I have served and I just got a t-shirt.
Yeah.
Again, these are all hypothetical, of course.
Yeah.
All this discussion, I'm not thinking of a specific person when I'm giving all of those examples. So I'm just giving us a situate wherein we could apply those.
Yeah.
I wanna hear what you're thinking as we're going through this.
Yeah.
I wanna hear what you're thinking. So again, they were indignant because it's coming from that emotion. You don't get mad for no reason.
Yes.
There is that emotion.
They're very mad.
They're not just mad. They're very mad.
Yeah.
They
And I
were-
think it's good also to see to process it in that way, like when we experience emotions like that, strong emotions, like we gotta think like, okay, where's this coming from? Why am I feeling this way? Because sometimes you just brush it off, but then if you leave it unchecked, it could really be something big in the future.
Exactly, because
Yeah.
again, it was in 935. It came out. Jesus,
Ask them,
asked them,
hey, what were you
but they
talking
didn't
about?
want to talk about it. But it's gonna come out sooner or later. It's still gonna resurface, and we're resurfacing in Mark 10.
That's right.
So whatever the case, Jen, in this situation revealed not just the disciples' mindset, but the condition of their hearts. I think the mindset of the heart is what I wanted to talk about here.
Yeah.
Their anger wasn't fully righteous at its core. They were upset because James and John had beaten them to the punch, just like what Gabby said. They long for the same thing. Actually, their indignation is coming from a longing, which is the same thing. They were longing for position, they were longing for prominence, and they were longing for power, and felt threatened by the possibility of losing out on what they desired because someone beat them to the punch.
Yeah.
Whoa. Think about that. It's quite a little, I don't know if we're buffering, but everybody is quiet today. But it seems like it's not
They're still
buffering
there.
though. So
Maybe they're writing.
oh,
It's
good,
hard
good.
to write.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. I'll be waiting for those. But I hope this is helping, right?
Yes.
So now, on all of those, Jesus now once again took the moment to challenge and confront this mindset. Look at verse 42. And Jesus called them to him and said to them, just like in Mark chapter 9. You know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentile, again, keyword there, rulers of the Gentile, lord it over them, and again, and their great ones exercise authority over them. So two things that you see here, you know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentile, rulers and actually great ones. So this is about rulers, position, leadership, This is what Jesus was talking about. When James and John approached Jesus in Mark 10, verse 35 to 37, they weren't acting outside the norm. In fact, they were following a pattern deeply ingrained in human ambition. We want position, we want prominence, and we want power. That's why Jesus gave this example. The rulers of the Gentile. That's the world. That's the norm. That's what you see. And they're great ones. The one that's more important than the others. The one that is known above. There's a prominence, exercise authority over them. For me, when I read this, it's kind of like a warning from Jesus. And what is that? Let me just put this. Again, this is the second part of the sermon. I got 3 sermons here, just like I could have told you. Hang in there. Jesus gives a warning, and here's the first warning. When leadership is about position, it becomes self-serving. When leadership is about position, it becomes self-serving. What do I mean by this? Because again, rulers of the Gentile, lording over people. The word ruler there is that position, and also great ones is prominence, but yet rulers. So when it is about position, the hierarchy, it becomes self-serving. That means it's about me. What do you mean? Merely about what? Climbing a ladder of success for gaining position.
Right.
I want to climb up the ladder of success because I want to gain position because I want to serve me. Comment?
Yeah. Well, that's really what it is. You want to be successful because there's something you want to gain. And in the corporate world, you want to gain more position for more benefits, more money, more. You get something out of that position, and I think that it always serves you. That's what it is. It's self-serving.
Yeah. Gabby says it's a heart check again. What's our reason for serving? For our own recognition or for God's glorification? Yes.
Yeah.
And again, when leadership becomes about, or it's about position, it becomes self-serving. We're talking about the 3: position, prominence, and power. So when leadership is all about position, then it becomes self-serving. So I'm climbing the ladder of success to gain a position is because I want the benefit that goes with that. That's why we're huge on titles in the worldly kingdom.
Yes.
Titles, places us in a position
Yeah.
because again, it's self-serving most of the time.
Yeah. So if we give this an example in the church, like if when you serve in church and it's about position for you, then you want to be a leader as soon as possible because there's something that you want to gain out of it. Like,
Yes. And not only that. So, and again, this is based on experience, and people try to be a leader because they see that as a position, not a place to serve others, but a position. Because they don't see the responsibility. It shocks me when people aspire, when the ambition is quite for them, not for anything else. And we're gonna go back with the thinking. So I'm gonna go pursue this ladder of success. They see the positions or the responsibilities in church, the title in church as positions to gain more what? To gain for self-serving, to gain maybe I would say different things. Respect. Yeah.
to gain recognition, or some could be as simple as to be first in.
Yeah, to be
First in the line, to be first in the chair,
that's
to
why,
be first in the door.
Again, we're not saying it's happening, but it could be like, I wanted to be part of the admin is because we're the one serving because I could reserve food for my friends. That's aspiring that. Self-serving.
Yeah.
You wanted the position is because you want the benefit.
Yes.
But because it's a worldly benefit, by the way. So because again, the process we're thinking is because we're thinking like for me. It's the worldly mindset. Here's the next thing. When leadership is about prominence, that means about recognition, it becomes self-centered. So if it is about us, it becomes self-centered, prioritizing recognition and status over genuine influence, growth, and the well-being of others. And this is where I think it gets a little tricky, I think, because again, we live in a society now where an influencer is heralded and exalted above everyone else. And I don't want to offend people, but let me just speak what's in my mind. With that, I'm not thinking of anyone, and I have to make sure that you understand what I'm saying. When leadership is about prominence, it's about recognition. It's about when we come into a place of leadership. When you think it's about when the heart is about prominence, it becomes about you. Just why? The example of this is, I remember this. I remember this from an example of Pastor Steve. Remember when we were having the seminar, he said that, he attended the church. One time he got invited, and the moment you enter the church is the picture of the pastor on the poster, the picture of the pastor in the lobby, and then, all of those banners, streamers, and everything. So now you're announcing to people, leadership is about that. It's about prominence. You get recognized. But if we are not careful, really, we have to watch out our heart. It becomes self-centered. So now let me shift that. Maybe now it's not like that, but maybe now it's all about the digital world. It's always about your picture on the social media. We don't put it in banners anymore, because again, it's safe, but it's in social media.
Yeah.
So we wanted to announce to people that, hey, we're important.
Yeah.
But yet, it becomes, if we're not careful, self-centered. That you think about you when you come to church, because you're going to shoot yourself a picture or a video, then it's about how you dress and how you, again, self-image is what's being highlighted here. Please, I'm not saying that you don't dress up, you don't, but it becomes that. So when you're
Central focus.
when you're speaking, it's all about, okay, I want to make sure that I would craft some portion of my message, and just to make sure it's going to be, because again, if we are not careful, it becomes that. I'm not saying that all of the people that does that, they have this. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, just be careful. That's why I'm saying Jesus gives a warning here. So what is the condition of our heart when we do all of those things? And number 3, when leadership is about power, it becomes centered on self-preservation. What do I mean by that? It focuses on controlling others. It focuses on manipulation to maintain authority, rather than guiding and inspiring and serving those entrusted to lead. So I've seen those people, they're drunk with power. They want to control everything. In the process, they're manipulating people. They manipulate people through relationships. That's why, I tend to not, because again, with the position of a pastor, I have to be careful. Because my whisper is a shout for a lot of people. As I've heard from one pastor who said that. Jesus' solution here this is a warning that Jesus was giving to them. Wow, I know this is a lot. Process this. So when leadership outside or in the church becomes about position, but it becomes about prominence, but it becomes about power, because that's what they were asking. They were not saying that loudly, but that was what was perceived within the culture. It becomes about what? You look at those meaning gen. Self is in the middle of everything. Self-serving, self-centered, self-preservation. Any comment on that? Everybody's silent today. So. And Jesus' solution to the norm of leadership is not focused on position, prominence, and power. His position on this is not that. It's a radical shift. Because when all of those Gentile rulers and great ones is the people that are prominent, powerful, you see them everywhere. Even the things that they do is that, even the doing for the least of the brothers becomes a highlight of themselves. We have to be careful. And here's Jesus' solution to that. He gives the warning, and then he gives us the truth. And here's the truth in God's kingdom. But it shall not be so among you. Look at that. Not be so among you. That means everything that he talked about, this is not how we operate in a different, as if in a simple terminology. But is the contrast. So this is not how we should be. But whoever wants to be great, he uses that because, again, the great ones exercise. Remember that on the verse? The great ones, says here, exercise wants to be great among you must be your servant. Whoever must be first among you, because again, the first there are, when you look at the first one, rulers of the Gentiles. The first is about position. must be a slave. Jesus, I was reading this, Jen, and Jesus gave two models, for lack of a better description here. Two examples that Jesus used are servants and slave to drive a point. That's why I underlined that whole thing, and we're going to go through that. Jesus used the example of servants and slaves in Mark 10:43-44 to draw attention to the essential characteristics that define true greatness in his kingdom. There are two here. He uses this too. Maybe the example that they didn't expect. Because again, greatness, really? A slave for greatness? Servants for rulers? Jesus, come on. This is not leadership lesson that we're talking about. But it's something about this. Jesus uses the normal situation that he sees, the norm that people look down to, that is not prominent among the culture, but yet Jesus picked that up. No position, no power, no prominence in the eyes of the world. And Jesus picked that. Seems like very low in the worldly kingdom, but yet has a high value in God's kingdom. That is what? Servanthood and service. And what is this servant and slave models that we're going to look at? And this is where I'm going to end. Don't worry, we're almost there. The first one is this. When you look at servants and models, Jesus was speaking about humility. Humility. But if not to be among you, whoever would be great among you must be your servant. And whoever would be first among you must be the slave. When you talk about servants and slave, the characteristic there is about humility. Servants and slave are humble by definition, as they exist to serve the needs of others rather than to fulfill their own desires or ambition. They're humble.
Yeah.
Because the position requires humility. You cannot be a servant or a slave if you're not humble. You're going to die. Isn't it? Because this is what it is. The whole definition of humility comes with that model that Jesus was presenting to them. Jesus' leadership is about serving the people who follow you. Not people serving you, but serving the people who follow you. Because true leadership in God's kingdom means being a servant, willing to lay aside personal comfort, ambitions, or desires for the sake of others. You're willing to lay aside all of those is because your heart is to serve. Not to get ahead, not to get the benefit on your own, not to get the benefit from others, before others, but yet setting those aside for the sake of others. At the end of the day, why this matters, it's about the willingness to be lowly and invisible for the sake of others' well-being. That means you stoop low and you just work in the background. You don't need to be noticed. Humility. I'm going to ask you, Jen, I'm going to just read some few comments here from JC. For some people, they just want the attention of others. They want to get validated by seeking approval. They tend to forget that they are serving Jesus, not the people who surrounds them. Yeah. So this is the first one, Jen. I mean, for all the things, Jesus didn't use the model or the example of a king, but for this, he uses the two that is invisible in the eyes of people. No one would dare to, admire or even have an ambition to be a servant and a slave. But yet, all of that, Jesus was what? Saying it's about humility. The needs of others before mine. And I'm willing to set aside my own ambition for the benefit of other people. Any comment?
Yeah. Well, later maybe.
Okay.
I'm reserving my comment.
Got you.
To wait for you to finish the next.
And here's the next one. Not only humility, but servant and slave. Jesus was talking about selflessness and sacrifice. Selflessness and sacrifice. And again, both servants and slaves embody selflessness, as their role is to serve the needs of others, even at a great personal cost. At a great personal cost. It's very inconvenient to be a slave and a servant because you don't control your time when they ask you to do something. I mean, come on. There's a cost here. In the ancient world, slaves often had to give up their own desires, freedoms, and lives to meet the needs of their master or the household. So that means selflessness. You will sacrifice things. Selflessness means placing others before oneself, choosing to sacrifice personal comfort or ambition for the good of others. This is what Jesus was teaching them. Look at those slaves. Examine, the servants. This is what I'm teaching you here. Because Jesus is calling us to have the similar mindset. Greatness in his kingdom is about choosing to serve others, even at a personal cost, not seeking to elevate oneself above others. That's why we stoop low, not we exalt ourselves. Because selflessness, sacrifice, sometimes you're not going to get recognized. That's what it is in God's kingdom. You're not after the recognition, you're after to serve your master in that context, in that situation. And when I say serve our master, we're talking about serving God. Let's read this from Lila.
She says, humble leadership doesn't mean you think less of yourself, but it means you think about yourself less and you think of others more.
Amen. And selflessness is that. Again, sacrificing. And here's the last one. Complete obedience. When you talk about slave and servants, it's all about obedience. And not just obedience, complete. Both servants and slaves are expected to act in complete obedience to the will of their masters. In a sense, that's why when you look at the story of Genie and the Aladdin, your wish is my command. So that means they are under the authority of another, and their work is not dictated by their own desire, but by the instructions given to them.
That's right.
This role reflects obedience, the willingness to follow the master's will without questioning it, understanding that their purpose is to fulfill the master's need. The whole purpose in God's kingdom when we serve is that we are doing it to fulfill the master's will. Not my will, but his will be done. So why this matters in calling his followers to be like servants or slaves? Jesus is teaching us that leadership in God's kingdom requires obedience to God's will, okay? And will not seek our own agenda or personal advancement. And that's the problem, isn't it? When you come into this and you apply this even outside, because again, people are, in the world, people are full of themselves. They are about their own personal agenda. And you bring that into the church and I have my agenda is just simple. To honor God in my life, in everything that I do, in my marriage, in my workplace, and to make disciples, because this is what God had called me to do. Because Westminster, Abby says this, man's chief end is to glorify God and to enjoy him forever. Interesting, isn't it? Complete obedience to his will, not mine. That's why this is quite important, because again, if we have our own agenda, that's why there's division in churches, because we have our own agenda. We cannot just be under people. We wanted to do our own thing all the time. Always. And we sugarcoat that with many description of why we can't be and we can't work with others. And that's why if we're not careful, then haven't you noticed the other one is what? Self-centered. This one is other-centered, but that's not complete. It's also God-centered. Because again, if it is only others-centered, without God in it, it's going to be whacked at the end of the day. That's why at the end of the day, this is what Jesus said. Jesus gave the ultimate example of humility, selflessness, sacrifice, and obedience, and that is him. Here's what he said, for even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. And again, he's talking about that. Where's that? You read the Bible, John 13, Jesus was washing the feet of the disciples. Come on, he came to the lowest position. And to give his life as a ransom for many. Again, sacrifice, selflessness, and humility. Philippians chapter 2 talk about that. The emptying of himself, kenosis. For us to be able to what? For him to be able to, do what the Father asked him to do. From the streets of gold in heaven to here, stooping down here on earth with us. Because Jesus is the ultimate example of both the servant and slave model of leadership. His life and ministry demonstrate the deepest understanding of humility, selflessness, and obedience to God's will. So that's why he said he is that example for the Son of Man. Again, he used this terminology, Son of Man, which is found in Daniel and also Ezekiel, talking about this Messiah that's going to come, named as the Son of Man, that has authority, of course. He not only taught about servant leadership, but also embodied it in the most powerful and sacrificial way. Because at the end of the day, Jesus was teaching there, but yes, Jesus was saying, in a sense, when he said this is what I'm thinking, that let me show you what it is. I'm not just going to talk about this. I will show you how it is done. Jen, comment.
Yeah.
That's a lot of things. So it's about 50 minutes of preaching
Yeah.
right there.
So just for me, what I was pondering on while you were talking was, when you made the definition of the servant, serve the needs of others, and when I consider that, a servant has a master, and the ultimate goal is to serve the master.
Yep.
The slave and the servant, the ultimate goal is really, the focus is the master.
Yep.
Whatever the master does, the slave and the servant obeys and follows completely.
Whatever the master's will.
Exactly,
Yeah.
whatever the
Command.
master's will. Because if we put ourselves, like if we're servants and slaves as a model, if we consider ourselves as that, we should have a master. That's the first and foremost thing, because if not, it would either be self or it would be others. Which self and others really will not be good masters.
We're
They're never gonna be good masters. But if we focus, just like what we talked about, at the start of the year, and as we went through the cross series, focusing on the mercies of God, and him being our master, and we see him, and whatever he tells us, we obey. And whatever we do to others is just a consequence of our obedience. It's really, we act because it is the master's will. And so we tend to love others, not because they are lovable, but because we love him. That's why we tend to serve others. And so I think I love the idea that it is anchored upon our master's will.
Exactly.
And I think that, we are able to serve humbly, we are able to serve selflessly and sacrificially and obey when we know who our master is. And I think
and that is what you said, is that we are able to serve the right way.
yes.
And because at the end of the day, in a sense, in 45, Jesus was revealing himself. I am that. I am a worthy master.
Exactly.
Because everything that I talked about, I will do it. I will do it.
Yeah.
Because again, for you to follow someone, and that person is not a good example, but Jesus was saying, for even the Son of Man, that's me.
Yeah.
I didn't come, not to be served, but to serve. Haven't you been watching what I'm doing? I'm serving the people.
Yeah.
I'm not after this for the popularity. I'm not after this about, how many likes I'm going to get from Facebook or from Instagram or from
from the
social media
Pharisees.
or from the Pharisees or from the crowd. The crowd wanted to make him king just by feeding them. Jesus was like, no, I came here to serve. That's why he was healing the people. They were feeding them, is to serve them. But the ultimate here is to give my life as a ransom for many. That means, here's the greatest one, is that I'm going to sacrifice myself. Because this is how the kingdom operates. And he was saying is this, that I am that worthy example for you, a master for you to follow.
Yeah. And even Jesus considered him, he said, my food is to do the will
Of
of
my
my Father.
Father.
He's also, gave us a model of what that looks like, of having having someone in authority that you follow.
Yep.
That you
He is that, with that, following the Father's will and what, the triune God plan. And also he was saying that if I do that, then hey, right? Why don't you look at my example?
Yes.
Because if we're going to look at the world, it's going to be wow.
Yeah.
We're going to follow. It's all about position, prominence, and power. And this one is quite different. Go ahead.
Yeah. And when we serve in church, I think having that perspective, hey, I'm signing up to serve, I'm serving today, not just for the sake of other people, but I'm serving, my focus is to please and honor God. And that's the most, I'm doing the will of my Father. And I'm going to do it humbly, selflessly, sacrificially, and in full and complete obedience
To
to
him.
God.
And that's why when you get corrected, you're not throwing a fit. right? Because
Because
no,
it's not
for
about
God.
you.
It's not about you.
It's not to preserve yourself.
And it
It's
doesn't
not-
matter as well if it is about serving in the lowliest position. That means it doesn't matter to you into what assignment you are given,
Yes.
because it's all about for God and to serve the people of God.
Yes.
When it becomes something more than that, then it becomes a little bit sus, as my younger daughter would say. Is that a good use?
Yeah.
There you go. It's a sus. When you come to church with a different, you know, a sus. I'm using it again, just to make her mad.
Yeah.
So think about that. So again, I want to hear your thoughts on this. So we have three things here. We look at the prominence, power. Okay, we look at position, prominence, and power, and then we look at the emotions maybe that we need to match out. The
Jealousy.
the jealousy, the betrayal,
The
and also
pride.
pride and entitlement. Why they were mad, because again you have to process that. And lastly, also he gives a warning, right? When leadership becomes about position, prominence, and power, and we see it becomes self-centered, it becomes self-focused. And what's the other one? I forgot. Let me just go read that.
Self-preservation.
Self-serving,
Self-serving.
self-centered, and self-preservation. And lastly, Jesus gives us the model of what? Servanthood and servant and slave,
Yes.
and having a master.
Which is serving humbly, selflessness, and sacrificially, and complete obedience. Yes.
So Jane says sus and started laughing emoji. Yes, Jane.
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's read a comment from Lila.
Yeah, Lila says, for me, worldly leadership is so stressful and tiring because of the constant chasing the world's expectations and serving all the idols of my life. Kingdom leadership is joyful and peaceful because of our mission is to serve God and only Him. Yes.
Because at the end of the day, Jen, you still have a master. Yeah. It's either yourself or others, pleasing your mom, pleasing your dad, pleasing some people, or you.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I want to please God.
Yeah.
Because at the end, here's what it is, right? When Jesus returns, what he's going to say, well done, good and faithful servant of mine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with you pleasing your parents, and as long as you please God, you please the Lord, and everything else follows when you please the Lord.
And I think sometimes we please our parents is because that's the whole
what's
point.
pleasing to God.
But sometimes it goes overboard when I say not please your parents, is that sometimes when we please the people around us, when you know that you're now no longer obeying Him,
That's right.
then that it becomes more about them, not about God.
God, that's right. Yeah. Good.
All right, so it's very silent, no comment. Only Lila is chiming in. I'm waiting for you guys. Come on.
Yes.
Let me
This
let
is like
me
a
see.
4-part preaching in one.
Yeah,
Says-
sorry, I just dumped everything
Yeah.
today, but as you could see, I was so excited studying this. As you could see, there's a lot, but yet,
Yeah,
I don't
but
want
it's
to
a
miss on
great
that.
heart check to just kind of like really see what's going on in our hearts as the Holy Spirit would reveal it to us. I'm
Yeah.
sure that the Holy Spirit has been speaking as you are hearing the word today, and of course we are gonna be praying together.
there you
and we're
go.
gonna
Start
transition.
with
Yes, of
prayer,
course.
because you're not writing anything, so I'm just gonna move
Yes,
forward here.
yes,
So
So we're gonna pray, and I know there's a lot of processing that needs to happen, and let's process it with the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
I think that's the most important.
I agree.
Yeah.